Welcome to our first Net Gains Alliance webinar. Looks like we have plenty of attendees on the line. I would ask that you let us know of any difficulties with audio or visual through the chat function. My name is George Tramiel. I am CEO of Council Fire. Council Fire is an independent consultancy that works on sustainable oceans and other matters around the world. We are the organization behind the Net Gains Initiative. I'm joined today by several members of our team, George Lapointe, Kate Wing, and Jonathan Webster. Together, we will take you through our agenda and cover the topics as described in the agenda. We look forward to your participation. There will not be any opportunity for our participants to participate through audio functions, but we will be taking questions through the chat window. And the expectation is we'll work our way through the agenda and then tackle, hopefully with about 30 minutes or so, tackle all the questions that may come up over the course of our presentation. So for those that are not familiar, Net Gains Alliance is a relatively new initiative that is focused on improving the collection, management, preservation, analysis, storage, and use of data to optimize economic, social, and environmental performance of U.S. fisheries. The program launched out of a prior effort that involved several organizations, nonprofits, industry members, folks from federal and state agencies to explore how it is that we could enhance and improve data modernization for the management of U.S. fisheries. We worked for a couple of years as a collective group to identify a set of recommendations that were issued in a report known as the
Fishing for Net Gains.
Fishing for Net Gains report. If anyone does not have that or hasn't seen it, we're happy to make that available to you, and in fact, perhaps can include it when we share a recording of today's webinar. That effort, which took place over a period of 24 to 36 months, led into the establishment of the Net Gains Alliance. We'll be sure to mention before the end of today the way that any of your organizations might join the Net Gains Alliance. We do have a website, netgainsalliance.org. On the website, you will see the parameters associated with membership. There's a series of statements and expectations for membership laid out on the website and an opportunity to join. Fairly low bar for participation, but you can get all of the details on that. With that, today's webinar will be focused principally on the programs that we, the Net Gains Alliance, intend to support through 2019 and 2020. As many of you may be familiar with, we have some funding available to invest in opportunities to help achieve our mission. George Lapointe and Kate Wing will be describing the types of projects that we are seeking, the types of projects that we're supporting at this point or expect to support starting this fall, and hopefully receive input from you on the types of projects that we are interested in and where we might identify additional candidates into the future. With that, if we haven't missed anything, Jonathan, we're good? Excellent. Let me turn it over to George Lapointe and Kate Wing to begin discussing our 2019 project focus.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kate Wing. I've been working with the Net Gains Alliance since the beginning of the Fishing for Net Gains paper. I'm a consultant based in California who's been working on fisheries and conservation issues for much of my career with a focus on data and helping facilitate better data exchange, specifically for the last 5 years. George, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is George Lapointe. I am a consultant who works on marine fisheries issues. I've been, like Kate, I've been with the net gains process since the beginning. I've been a consultant for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was the state agency director, marine fisheries agency director in Maine, and I worked for the Atlantic States Marine Commission prior to that.
Great. So one of the things that NetGains is focusing on in support of overall modernization is looking for projects that we see as potentially catalytic to advance these goals of faster, better, higher quality, more efficient data collection and dissemination in service of conservation, social and economic goals for fisheries. So we have been scanning the landscape and out scoping for projects where we felt that the Net Gains Alliance could potentially complement efforts that were underway or needed to get started with the funding that our group has to give away in project matching funds. So we're going to walk through the first set of projects that we're planning to announce and finalize this month that are going to be our lead projects for 2019. And you'll see the titles on the screen. That there's a user-centered design focused project. There's one about integrated fishery reporting. We are looking for something with the for-hire or charter boat sector, and also something more core about data sharing agreements. So I'll start off with the first project, and we're going to walk through these project overviews, and again, we'll have time to talk more about them during the Q&A. So our first project is focused on user-centered design and West Coast fisheries data. This project is also sometimes referred to as one-touch reporting on the West Coast, and it's a project that came out of an effort that was started by a staffer at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, Todd Hay, who put in a proposal for an internal NOAA Fisheries grant to redesign the commercial reporting system to improve the experience for captains, for fishers who have to report on multiple forms and using multiple streams of data now. And the goal is to really integrate across the logbooks, permits, and other data streams that these fishermen have to handle to make it a better experience for them to submit the data, but also to coordinate the data on the back end so that different offices at NOAA and partners at the councils and the FINs can easily run the analyses they need to do without having to do a bunch of workarounds and emailing files to each other. So this is a project that's really building on a much larger grant from within NOAA Fisheries, but where NetGains saw an opportunity to increase the capacity of doing this kind of work in concert with industry, getting best feedback from industry, and bringing in best practices from the private sector about user-centered design and designing with and for industry, not just to meet NOAA's internal criteria. I'll pass it off to George for the next project about integrated fishery reporting.
Thanks, Kate. We have had, well, and many people on the call have had a long interest in integrated fisheries reporting with the ultimate goal of having a marine-generated unique trip identifier to help with data integration, data access, etc. I've been involved with some of the people, I think, on the call and ACCSP trying to work towards that, but we're not there yet. And we're taking a stepwise approach, looking for logical next steps to work towards that ultimate goal. The first step we're going to take this year is a one-year grant to sponsor a meeting to talk about one-touch reporting. And that one-touch reporting is, no, I'm one-stop reporting, sorry. One-stop reporting is where a fisher submits one report and it goes to multiple management agencies. The National Marine Fisheries Service Greater Atlantic Region has an FIS grant that I believe is going to be approved or is in the process, but that won't start until next May. So our goal, our project here is to get the people on that team together to jumpstart the project earlier this year, to do some of the meeting work so that when the big FIS grant gets launched, it'll be farther ahead.
Yeah, and this is Kate, if I can just add to that, you may look at these two projects and say, wow, this looks like very similar projects, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And that was deliberate from our perspective. We think there are different ways to solve what is a similar and common problem in fisheries reporting now. And we were hoping that by supporting two slightly different aspects of solving this problem, we can better exchange lessons and best practices across the regions, while also support regions in developing solutions that really work best for the data systems and the communities they're supporting there.
Yeah, smart projects are going to be transferable elsewhere. The next project is for higher electronic reporting. There's been a lot of interest in electronic reporting in the for hire fleet around the country. The Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council started a mandatory electronic reporting program, I think in March of last year. California has a voluntary program that's mandatory for Sport Fishing Association of California members. The South Atlantic and Gulf are working on electronic reporting. New England's interested. Alaska has some programs as well. Our idea here is twofold. One is to get a workshop together with for hire captains who use the programs, managers who work with them, and app developers to talk about how the programs can be improved. And some, like in the South Atlantic, will not yet be started. But to learn from the positive lessons and the negative lessons from elsewhere. And importantly, to talk to captains about what else can be added so they get extra benefit out of the programs beyond the reporting that's required through the fishery management plans. I've talked to a number of captains who say, geez, I'd love for there to be extra benefits. And our idea here is to get the captains and app developers and managers together, discuss what some of those benefits are, because it hasn't been clearly defined to me, and then prioritize them and have the app developers say what it would take to develop the programs, with the idea of making it better for more consistency among the regions to the degree we can, improving the programs for the bumps and warts in them, and we all know the programs have bumps and warts, and providing more benefit back to the charter captains.
And then our last project for this year is on a Pacific-wide pelagic data integration project. So the NOAA Fisheries has these entities called professional specialty groups, and they're a great process by which people from different centers and regions, maybe different line and reporting offices, but who have complementary expertise as developers, as IT, as data experts, have a chance to get together and talk about common problems and challenges. And one of these groups is specifically working on highly migratory species and other pelagics in the Pacific. And data on these types of fisheries involves not only Hawaii, the territories, California, Oregon, and Washington, but also providing data to meet international management obligations under the regional fishery management organizations, or RFMOs. And in order to get that data from one place to another, it's not so much a technology challenge as it is a legal and policy challenge. And so there's this network of individually created and written data sharing agreements that governs, say, how catch data from one source, like a landings ticket, can be transferred to another office to be matched against catch data from a different source. Maintaining and securing and meeting all of these data sharing agreements can be time consuming and can also result in situations where the lawyers and the policy experts who wrote the data sharing agreement to protect what needs to be confidential and share what needs to be shared end up writing language that isn't easy for developers and data managers to understand, so they're not sure that they're building the systems to meet the needs, or vice versa. So because of the work that's going on right now with data integration in Pacific pelagics and HMS species, it provides a great opportunity to look at the types of data sharing agreements that have already been constructed, look for common language, and basically essentially develop a template that people could use for data sharing agreements that both the technical and the policy people understand, and allow those agreements to be drawn up much faster and much more effectively and really let the data go to who it needs to get to in a timely manner, make it easier for everyone to get the right data flows through the system. So this is a policy-focused one that also has a technology component, because we are really wanting to develop a list of language that is comprehensible and usable by both communities. And in this case, this is one where we are going to circulate a request for proposals amongst people who have worked on these types of data sharing agreements before, either at other agencies or possibly with some other fisheries, and have them pull together best practices and a library of usable language specifically for use in the Pacific HMS sector. So those are the four projects that we identified to sort of get started and soft launch this part of NetGains' work. We wanted to begin by picking projects where we felt like there was either some momentum or some opportunity to catalyze conversations that were outstanding, like we were working with the for-hire sector, that could lead into other projects and other partnerships in year 2. But we are expecting to make another round of project support grants in 2020. And we are going to be seeking input for future projects over the next few months as we get ready to develop those proposals. So we hope that one of the things you'll do as a result of this webinar is stay engaged. And I'll turn it back over to George Schimmel to close us out and send us into the Q&A section.
Thanks, Kate and George. And let me jump back just for a moment to the purpose of the NetGains. I managed to gloss over a couple of additional things that I'd want to make mention of now. And clearly, all of this information is found at netgainsalliance.org. But in addition to the grant making and our attempts to catalyze important projects to advance data modernization, we, as in our role as neutral convener and a collective group of experts, are paying attention to national policy, looking for opportunities to work with the agency and other regulators to enhance and improve policies that support data modernization. In addition, a principal objective of our group is to build a constituency for this, right? So that's an education and outreach function that requires not only recruiting organizations to join the Alliance, but to reach those who have not had much exposure to the potential benefits of data modernization, either through stories or through projects, such that that constituency will continue to advocate for data modernization for U.S. fisheries beyond the end of our initiative. So those are 2 other functions of the NetGains Alliance that we'll be pursuing. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan Webster to bring us through a Q&A session. I see that a few questions have queued up regarding our projects and the NetGains Alliance process, and we'll take it from there. I think we have...
Can I jump in for a minute?
Sure.
This is George again, and Kate and George both mentioned next year projects, and I suspect many people on the webinar have been engaged in these projects, and so we really welcome your calls or contacts about what those next steps might be, like integrated fisheries reporting. I envision 6 or 7 steps that go beyond this, and some of the people on the webinar know what those 6 or 7 steps are. So we would really like to hear what their ideas are about how to grow the project, the general concept overall, and how NetGains can effectively fit into that process.
And in that context, we do have an advisory panel that supports our work. You can see the individuals that are involved on the website with the exact idea of doing exactly what George just described, and couldn't agree more. We'll need and want input from the community to help us direct our limited funding and our limited time in the most effective areas possible. Jonathan?
Yeah, no, thank you. I've just gotten one text has just come through, and it's asking to Kate or to George Lapointe, can you provide any further clarity or specificity on projects, likely projects to be funded in 2020?
Sure. So the criteria that we have been using to select our projects are, we're looking for projects that build capacity and data literacy at the regions and councils and science centers. meet a core management, outreach, or sustainability need that's been identified by a council or region, like helping stock assessments, helping keep track of catch history better, helps take pilots to scale or builds on existing work, could inform national guidance or actions that help smooth the paths for broader adoption of technological innovations and general modernization efforts. Projects that span regions or fisheries, we really have tried to look for projects that we thought could have impact not just on one particular state or region, but that we thought were really transferable. And we are looking for opportunities to leverage existing funds. NetGains does not have an enormous pile of money to give away. We do have somewhat limited funds at this point, and so we are looking for opportunities to partner and to build off of other funds that's already out there. So I would say those are the criteria we've used to date. We also, I think, going forward, are going to try and balance that. How can we leverage things versus how can our funding take on things that are hard for other funders to cover, right? So our funding, because it's provided by private foundations, is actually very flexible and can in some cases do things that we know federal grants and other funds can't do as easily, just because we can cover costs for travel and spark conversations that might be more limited with federal funds. So we are looking for sort of a balance between making sure we can match and amplify work that has support from other places, and where is there something that really wouldn't happen without NetGains' support.
Great, thank you very much, Kate. We've got a question that's come through here. Says, will the for-hire ER project consider ways to combine ER with dockside and/or at-sea sampling surveys?
At this point, the dockside component of ER or for hire ER is important because of calibration and validation. And we are at this point just really concentrating on the efficacy and the growth within the ER program. So there's a lot of, again, follow-on steps. The validation issue is one, and the at-sea sampling. So at this point, they aren't connected, but I'd be interested in people's views on how they think they should be in the future.
Thank you, George. A process question has come through, but it's a good one to be raised and happy to clarify. It says, not seeing the grants you are talking about on your website. Where are they, or will they be there soon? The answer is yes, they will be there soon. This is truthfully the sort of public unveiling of these specific grants, and that information will be included with a bit more background on the website over the course of the coming week. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Oh, someone is asking about the NIMS headquarters FIS program and then the Fisheries One-Stop Shop. The Fisheries One-Stop Shop, George L., do you want to talk about the FOSS project?
We've talked to people, so there's a bit of a sequencing issue here, and we've talked to people in the federal agency and with ACCSP, and I know that a grant has been submitted, and I don't think they've done approval yet. And so if the grant isn't approved, we won't have a project. So I mean, there's a sequencing issue here about when FIS grants get approved, and our follow-on as well, if that's kind of the place the question was coming from.
No, I think so. I mean, the FIS program still exists. It's still a NIMS program, and it's an internal funding program where folks at the agency can apply for funds and get funds for a lot of work that is around modernization and upgrading and maintaining legacy systems. For the Fisheries One-Stop Shop project, I would suggest talking with folks at NOAA Fisheries about why that project is not continuing in the way that it is. But I would say in our scoping, what we've heard is that specific approach to trying to integrate data and set up a system in that way is no longer seen as the preferred approach by the people that we're working with. So while the goal might be similar in terms of simplifying the interactions for the people who are collecting and submitting the data, like captains, the actual sort of technological back end and the way that's implemented needs to be updated to reflect more modern technologies and the ways people are seeking to integrate data now. So I'll just say that my understanding is that it's seen as somewhat of an outdated approach in the way it was envisioned. People want to know about your for-hire ER project. Many people want to know, George, so we encourage you to sign up for the NetGains email list and or email George Lapointe if you know him. We can give everybody George Lapointe's email as he develops the ER for Hire workshop.
So the ER for Hire workshop, we're going to hire a facilitator, and we're targeting January, February to get people together. One workshop nationwide rather than one East Coast, West Coast, although I'd be happy to have input on that. And again, this is a question of sequencing. We've had the ER program going in the Mid-Atlantic for over a year now. The California program has been going for a number of years. The programs in the South Atlantic, the South Atlantic and the Gulf are still emerging, and we said if we wait for those to emerge, we might lose our focus. And so the idea is January, February to get a group of engaged people together, to improve the way those programs are developing or have developed, and importantly to talk about potential other utilities business benefits for the people who are submitting the data.
And I would say on that question, the comment was the grants aren't on the website yet. We haven't done a full thing. We wanted to go ahead and have this webinar and just talk about the process and the ideas that we're planning on funding in this first year to start getting them out there. We actually still have to finalize our internal process in terms of, where the money is actually going to flow and who's actually going to be brought on. And as George Lapointe just mentioned, in some cases we're hiring a facilitator to run an event. So the full implementation of it isn't completely finalized, and that's one reason you're not seeing details on the website, but they will go on the website, and we wanted to at least start this conversation now and start being much more communicative about the work that NetGains is doing.
We've got another question that has just come in right now saying, have you encountered any roadblocks in these projects where multiple agencies, either at the state or federal level, will need to be coordinated data exchange and streaming on the back end?
We're on the yellow brick road, so we've encountered no problems whatsoever. All these projects are difficult. Otherwise, you guys, people on the call, many people would have done them already. And so it is the issue of coordination among jurisdictions, among individuals, among organizations is an important part of moving these ahead. And for some things, the unique trip identifier, some people will say we're really close and other people will say we aren't. And so it really is bringing the body politic along. And so that involves meeting with agencies, meeting with individuals, coordination between the states and the Fed. So there's a lot of work to be done there still.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we hope our role as a neutral convener and purveyor of useful information and really a limited advocate for good data and good processes positions us well to bring together those disparate interests in an effective way that often some of the other participating constituents are prevented from doing. So we recognize that there are difficulties, as George said. If it was easy, it would have been done already. But the hope is that our positioning allows us to be effective in those attempts, or slightly more effective in those attempts.
Great, thank you. Another one has just come through right now saying, what is the process for providing input on potential 2020 projects Also, are you looking for topics for specific project ideas?
So the answer is yes, and we have a general email called info@netgains.org that you can get to from our website. And at this point in time, I'd say send things to there. We all read them. It's a small shop, and we are looking for information. I'll point at that Dorothy Lohman, who's one of our core team members who couldn't join us today, and George Lapointe did a survey where you interviewed how many people? Like
Over 100.
over 100
About
people.
100.
Over 100 people while we were getting this effort started to ask them for suggestions about improvements and modernization opportunities that we saw in almost every region and fishery in the U.S.
That's correct.
And so we started from that giant spreadsheet and did a winnowing down to identify these projects. It wasn't just who we happened to be sitting next to on the plane. And we did also run these projects past our advisory panel members a couple of times to get their input and help prioritize them over some of the other ideas. So we are looking for ideas. We are looking for suggestions. We're not going to do a full open RFP process because we feel that it's worth us spending a bunch of time with the people who are going to move this work forward, the people who would be on the hook to do some of the delivery of this work, to make sure that it's really aligned with NetGains' goals and the capacities there to actually achieve what we are hoping to achieve. But the info@netgains.org is the best way to get a hold of us. And if you are looking to get a hold of one of us specifically, our core team will make sure that that gets to one of us and we can get back to you directly.
And that old spreadsheet of projects, we don't use much anymore because it's like 3 or 4 years old. But if there are new ideas beyond what we've discussed, beyond the convenings, we're completely open to considering those because, the kind of people on this webinar are working on cool things that would fit well within NetGains, and we'll see if there's fits there.
I see we do have a question about the East Coast, West Coast EM workshops and that they don't necessarily seem to involve electronic reporting. There may be just electronic monitoring. Those are NOAA Fisheries. They're doing that. We're keeping an eye on that. We have our members on the steering committee. But if you have questions about those meetings and how they should or should not include electronic reporting, we encourage you to reach out to Brett Alger at NOAA Fisheries, who is on Twitter @LGER Brett. Feel free to ping him and say, where's that electronic reporting? Is it going to be there? We can happily provide that as steering committee members, but those are not our particular jam.
And although we mentioned ER in the context of the for-hire fleet, there is management action at the New England Fishery Management Council right now to implement electronic reporting in the commercial fleet. It's in its early stages, so there is broader interest that people should pay attention to, and in my mind, encourage.
Thank you, George. We do not currently have any other questions in the queue, either on the chat function or in the questions function, and no further ones have come through by text or by email yet either. So we will go ahead and wait just about 30 seconds or so. If anybody does have additional questions or comments, we'll hang on. Just as we're waiting to give it another, an additional moment, just wanted to go around the table with George, or Kate. Are there any parting comments, or is there anything you'd like to include before we go ahead and sign off today?
I just want to I know there are a lot of people on this who maybe couldn't join the call, who have allowed us to sit down with them and ask them a lot of questions about what's needed, ask them a lot of questions that helped educate us about what's actually going on. And so while we're not able to support all the things all the time, I'm really grateful to the time that people on this call and that the larger community has spent with us to help us identify the projects we have going forward, and also the other convenings and efforts that we plan to do. So thank you for your time on this call and the time you've probably provided in advance to get us to where we are.
Absolutely, and in my mind, our best benefit comes from to use a Louisiana term, being lagniappe, something extra to programs that are already underway, and that's what we're trying to do. And so for the people on the call, and as Kate said, your colleagues, if there are ideas, please contact us, see how we can discuss plugging in and making the whole data modernization process move slowly ahead as it is. Thank you.
And one quick, George, if you had anything, the one other question did come through very quickly here, and it just says, is there a recreational reluctance to see the charter for hire succeed?
I'm sure there's reluctance out there somewhere, because there's reluctance about every goddamn program that comes along. But it's just, in the Southeast where I'm working with a federal agency on this, it is just a lot of steps, to get the programs together, to bring the people along, to do the education, to figure out how you do enforcement and compliance and use the data. So I think there's the bulk of the attitude is trying to make it succeed and hoping it goes faster than it is, but the body politic moves slowly.
Gotcha. Thank you, George.
Sure. I would just echo George and Kate's earlier comments. We've all been doing this sort of work for a very long time. I don't want to put numbers on it because it'll make us appear old. But this is a unique effort, or at least we hope it's a unique effort. We have flexibility. We have limited resources, but we have great expertise, flexibility, and we hope that we can build a willing constituency to help us build this back office infrastructure, or improve the back office infrastructure, if you will, to make all the efforts that you all are engaged in work more effectively. I think all of us have been frustrated at one point or another about the lack of interoperability, the legacy systems, the problems that present themselves in more efficient and effective management and use of data in this context. And so this is a unique initiative, time limited such as it is, and we hope that we're able to leverage the community, build a community for these improvements, and then leverage that community to direct us in the most efficient and effective ways so that we can apply our opportunities to advance data modernization on U.S. fisheries. So your input is critical. Your engagement is vital to our success. I hope that you walked away from today with a better understanding of what the Net Gains Alliance is all about, and that you'll find it to be in your best interest to join us on the path forward.
Great. On that note, I just wanted to say no further questions or comments have come through, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. So on behalf of George, and Kate, thank you very much for your time, and we do look forward to hearing your future questions. Have a great weekend ahead. Thanks. Bye.